Picture this. It's a gorgeous Saturday afternoon. The world outside is absolutely buzzing. Everyone's out doing something, being loud, going places. But you're just sitting somewhere completely quiet. Maybe you're tucked into a corner of your apartment, or chilling on a bench in an empty park. Or, honestly, maybe you're just sitting in your parked car for a few extra minutes. You aren't stressing about anything urgent. You're just letting your mind kinda wander at its own natural pace.
But right then, right in the middle of that perfect stillness, this tiny, nagging little voice creeps into your head going, wait, should I feel bad about this? We've all been there, right? But here's the thing, that voice of guilt, it's not actually yours. It's like this heavy little carry-on bag you've been lugging around, packed tight by years of societal pressure, telling us that being social automatically equals being happy, and that solitude is just, a sad last resort. Okay, let's dive into this, because what is actually happening in your brain during those quiet moments is honestly fascinating.
For the longest time, doing things alone has gotten a seriously bad rap. People just assume you're antisocial, or sad, or struggling in some way. But we are pivoting right now. We're moving from feeling broken to understanding a really profound truth. Preferring solitude isn't some weird personality flaw. It is a signal. Finding yourself doing certain things alone, on purpose, without anyone forcing you to, actually points to a highly evolved mind. Your brain is quite literally operating at a level that a lot of people just never reach.
So, trait 1, wrestling with problems alone first. Just think about what usually happens the absolute second most people encounter any kind of cognitive discomfort or stress. Their first instinct? Pull out the phone, fire off a text to the group chat, and instantly outsource that anxiety. They want a crowd to react with them. But your instinct is different. You choose to actually sit with that frustration. You roll the problem around in your head, analyzing the whole shebang completely alone before you ever ask for outside input.
Now, the science behind this habit is rooted in a really cool psychological concept called autonomous thinking. It's this genuinely rare ability to process uncertainty without outsourcing your cognitive discomfort to everyone else. Look, biologically speaking, most humans are hardwired to seek the safety of the herd when things get confusing. It feels so much easier to just grab someone else's opinion rather than wrestle with the unknown. But choosing to sit in the quiet, that means you're actively practicing thinking without a safety net.
And when you practice that autonomous thinking, you build something incredibly powerful, an internal locus of control. So the crucial point is, this is the deep-seated psychological belief that your own reasoning is actually worth trusting. People who cultivate this trait don't just feel more confident, they systematically make way better decisions over the course of their lives. And it's not necessarily because they'd score higher on some standardized IQ test, but because they have rigorously trained their minds to trust their own logic.
Let's look at trait number 2, which is all about how you handle your feelings. Now, we need to be clear here. There is a massive difference between completely shutting down because you're emotionally unavailable and intentionally going quiet to do the heavy inner emotional work. When a tough situation hits, some people retreat just to avoid the feeling altogether. But purposefully isolating yourself so you can ask brutally honest questions and fully process complex emotions, instead of, performing your grief or anger for an audience, is a profoundly healthy response. Doing that active, quiet, emotional work leads directly to something called emotional granularity. Think of it as having high definition for your feelings. You're able to identify the exact, specific texture of an emotion. You don't just feel bad or upset, you know the precise difference between feeling overwhelmed, disappointed, or just deeply nostalgic. This specific psychological trait is heavily linked to better mental health and much stronger relationships. And honestly, people who are constantly in motion, constantly surrounded by noise, they rarely develop it, simply because they never sit still long enough to feel anything clearly.
Moving on to trait 3, having unseen solo rituals. Maybe you take the exact same route on a walk every single week. Or maybe you've got a hyper-specific playlist reserved strictly for when you are 100% alone. Or perhaps your thing is just sitting in complete, uninterrupted silence for 5 minutes with your coffee before the daily chaos begins. Nobody assigned you these rituals. Nobody is watching you do them. You just started doing them one day, and they stuck. They're intentional, quiet building blocks of who you are.
And this brilliantly illustrates the concept of self-authorship. You are actively constructing your own inner world, rather than just passively waiting around for the external world to hand you one. It highlights a really deep level of psychological independence. I mean, think about the masses of people out there who literally need background noise, a TV left on, a podcast constantly blaring, a crowded room, just to feel okay in their own skin. Developing self-authorship means you figured out how to generate your own signal.
But here is where we really need to reframe that guilt you might feel when well-meaning friends tell you to get out more. There's a great irony at play here. Those who push you the hardest to be constantly social are very often utterly terrified of their own solitude. Why? Because when you are alone and quiet, there is absolutely nowhere to hide from yourself. A lot of people find that reality absolutely terrifying, so they stay constantly distracted. Recognizing this, it completely frees you from the guilt of your own quietness.
Which brings us to trait 4, making big life decisions without needing consensus. Social psychology has documented for decades just how powerfully human beings are pulled toward conformity, especially when we're uncertain. When we don't know what to do about a career change, a big move, or a relationship, the absolute primal instinct is to look around and mirror the crowd. But a mind at peace? It gathers input, sure, it listens to advice, but ultimately it retreats somewhere quiet to make the big calls entirely alone. You don't need a committee of friends to validate your choice.
There's a mindset that captures this perfectly. Other people's opinions are data. They're not your answer. Let that sink in for a second. It is such a powerful realization. When you operate with this rare kind of intelligence, you know exactly how to separate outside input from your internal instruction. You can hear everyone out, gather the data, without letting their personal anxieties suddenly become your compass.
Setting up that boundary is what psychologists call intellectual independence. It's that hard-earned ability to distinguish between external data and internal instruction. And we really need to validate how genuinely rare and difficult it is to actually develop this. You are actively fighting against ancient human survival instincts that scream at us to mirror the crowd so we don't get left behind. Achieving this level of intellectual boundary is a massive hallmark of a highly capable mind.
Next up is trait 5, enjoying your own company without needing to justify it. And the absolutely crucial word here is enjoying, not just tolerating. Look, there is a version of being alone that feels like exile, where you're just sitting by yourself desperately wishing you weren't. But then there's the fulfilling reality of a quiet room that doesn't feel empty at all. It feels completely full of your own presence, your own thoughts, and your own weird sense of humor that maybe only you find funny.
This brings us to self-companionship, which is simply defined as the capacity to be alone and feel whole. Now, this isn't just some nice-to-have, quirky trait. This is literally one of the single strongest predictors of long-term psychological well-being. To put it into perspective, this quiet, dedicated inner work outranks wealth, it outranks external achievements, and sometimes it even outranks social relationships when it comes to predicting your lifelong mental health. The ability to be alone and feel whole? It's an absolute superpower.
Which leads us straight to our final sign, trait 6, unprompted self-reflection. The truth is, most people in the world only reflect on their behavior when a disaster absolutely forces them to. They wait until a relationship completely blows up, or someone directly calls them out, or the consequences of their actions just become too painful to ignore. But a quiet mind, it does this preemptively. It's lying in bed at night thinking, why did I react that way today? What was I actually feeling underneath that? It's reflecting quietly on your own time just for the sake of understanding yourself better.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the term developmental psychologists use for this, a post-conventional mind. All that really means is you're operating from a moral and cognitive compass that is genuinely internal, rather than just reacting to external expectations and whatever the societal rules are at the moment. This final trait marks a fundamentally different, highly evolved relationship with yourself. You aren't being guided by the fear of what others think, you are being guided by a deep, genuine desire for internal alignment.
But all right, here is the hard truth of it all. There are no trophies for sitting alone and thinking deeply. None of these 6 traits we just talked about are loud. None of them are flashy. In a world that is constantly rewarding extroversion and nonstop motion, nobody is going to hand you a gold medal for processing your emotions quietly or making a really difficult life choice without a crowd's approval. The external world simply doesn't validate this kind of quiet intelligence, but the internal rewards, oh, they are staggering.
Let's rapidly summarize these invisible superpowers you're gaining just by slowing down. First, solitude builds a mind that deeply, inherently trusts itself. Second, it creates a robust sense of self that doesn't just shatter into a million pieces the moment it's put under pressure. And third, it develops a rare kind of intelligence that isn't measured by standardized tests or college degrees, but by profound, unshakable self-knowledge. These are incredibly powerful qualities that simply cannot be faked, and honestly, they can never be taken away from you.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final, kind of provocative question to chew on today. Who are you when nobody is watching? The fact that you even take the time to cultivate a rich, quiet inner life means you probably already know the answer to that.
You are building an intelligence that is exceptionally rare. Embrace it, trust it, and never let the noise of the world make you feel guilty for enjoying the quiet. Thank you so much for learning with me today, and I'll catch you in the next one.